This meeting is recorded.
Okay, from our previous class, we discussed about what is a VPN and how do we use a VPN in two different conditions. We talked about a site-to-site VPN, and also we talked about a remote SSL VPN, where user will be somewhere open in the internet and trying to access the office space or the corporate network. Then we have seen the use case of the remote SSL VPN or the client VPN. And we discussed the lab about the syslog server. We have seen, creating a server as a syslog service. And we did the logs forwarding to the syslog server. And then we also have seen quality of service. We talked about how do we avoid congestion, what is congestion avoidance versus congestion management. We talked about how do we classify the traffic, mark it, and then we talked about policying and shaping of the traffic. So that is how we will do the quality of service for the traffic that need to be shaped or prioritized as per the need of the traffic flow or when there is a high volume of traffic. Any questions from what we discussed yesterday, guys?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. We will start talking about AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting today. And also we'll go to port security, and we'll also see the multi-factor authentication, and then see how time permits for us. So let's go ahead and talk the topics. So authentication, authorization, accounting is just like giving permissions to the users to allow or deny the access on a specific device or a specific function. So if we take an example from yesterday, we have seen an example of person onboarding a flight, right? So first, if we take a similar analogy, the authentication is nothing but once we step into the airport, they will check our ID. They will take our driver's license or any ID proof that we are the person authorized to board the flight. So that is same as the authentication. Authentication is validating the person is actually the person who they are claiming to be. So that is about the authentication. First thing is to validate the user. So after validating the user, after checking the person identity, then we have to authorize the user based on the flight ticket that the user purchased. They will decide whether they should sit on economy or they should sit on the first class or the business class on the flight. So that is authorization. So based on what kind of ticket you purchased, what is your role, based on that, you will be given authorization in the flight, right? So that is authorization. So giving permission as per the identity. So that is authorization. And accounting means once we onboarded the flight, they will check our actions, like what kind of meal we want. That all comes under like what have we done on the flight. And then after that, we will step out of the flight. So what have we done on the flight? Did we safely onboarded? All of the information will be accounting, right? So whatever we have done on the flight, that can be considered as accounting, meaning like whatever the actions we have taken can be called as accounting. So there will be a person who is helping us in the flight with the needs in the flight, right? So whatever, let's say we want some water, that can be considered as like an action that we need on the flight. That can be considered as an accounting action, right? That is also an accounting. So if we put the same concept and theory on a specific router, let's say there is a router. So I wanted an engineer to log into this router, right? So they wanted to SSH to this router. SSH is nothing but logging in remotely, but let's say they wanted to log in. So the user should have a username and password to log in this router, and that is nothing but the authentication. So authentication is nothing but putting the username and password to log into the router. That is nothing but the authentication. So after authentication, there has to be authorization. So once the user logged in, based on the user identity or the user group, we can give them like read-only access or read-write access or super admin access. Depends on the role of the user in the company. If a network engineer is logging into the router, he may get the admin access. But let's say help desk is logging into the router, they may get only read-only access. So based on the role and the designation of the user in the company, the authorization will be changed, right? So that is how the authorization will be varied. And once the authorization is done, then the accounting. Accounting is nothing but whatever the actions the user taken on the router, like shutting down the interface, checking the memory, whatever the user did, that will have to be audited. So we have to make sure that we are accounting the user actions. Accounting is nothing but logging the user action. So we have to make sure a user, whatever the user does, have to be checked on the accounting logs. Okay. So these type of functions will be done by the AAA server. So if we look at the diagram, how does it look like? Like let's say there is a user and the user logged into his PC, and from his PC he is trying to log into a router. This router is connected to upstream AAA server. And this AAA server will be connected to the Active Directory where the user accounts will be there. Active Directory is where the company user data will be stored. So let's say when the user try to log into this router, so that request will be sent to the AAA server. The AAA server will validate the username and password of the user and make sure they are putting the right username and password. Once it's validated with the AD will send the accept request, accept response. The AAA server will give them based on the rule that we created on the AAA, it will set the permission, send it back to the user. So now based on the permission set by the AAA server, the user will get the permission and then he will be able to perform certain actions on the router. So he can do like logging in to the router and run show commands such based on the policy that we created, and whatever the actions that the user take on the router, like shutting down the interface, creating BGP protocol, OSPF protocol, that actions will be logged again on the AAA server to log what the user is doing. So this is all done by the AAA server. In productions, Cisco has its own AAA server called Cisco ICE, Identity Service Engine, and Aruba has its own service engine, which is called ClearPass. So every vendor will try to have their own AAA server, depends on the need. Right? So that is how the AAA works. So any questions on AAA, guys?
Sir,
Yes.
what if a user, if we use the interface, if he doesn't go through the authentication, if he directly go to the authorization, does that happen in such cases? Like while logging in or while signing in, if they doesn't go through the authorization, do that situation takes place?
How can a person board the flight without showing his identity? You are saying like he's bypassing the authentication? Is that what you're saying?
No, not the bypassing. Sometimes if the system glitches or errors, do
So
he can
there
go
is
to the
nothing
authorization?
called glitch, right? I mean, once you go to any router, you have to put the
Okay,
username and password. That is the first
okay,
step of
okay,
authentication. You cannot
okay,
log into the router without authentication.
okay.
Sir,
Yes.
so you said ISC from Cisco, like Cisco calls it ISC, the AAA server.
Yeah, Identity Service Engine.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so there are two protocols again under AAA. One is TACACS and the other one is Radius. Let's talk about the TACACS and Radius. So TACACS is the protocol that is used to make the communication between the router and all the way to the authentication server. So there has to be some sort of authentication that is happening between the router and the authentication server, right? So let's say a user log into the system will be connected to the router where he wanted to log into the router, and this router will be pointed to the AAA server, right? So from router to all the way to the authentication server, there has to be a protocol to securely send this data, whatever the user is sending, like access request, and the response should be coming back, right? So these have to be securely sent, and that can be done over the TACACS protocol. TACACS is developed by Cisco itself, so it's Cisco proprietary TACACS itself, and TACACS uses the port 49 basically, and it's end-to-end encrypted. Like whatever the user enters, that will be end-to-end encrypted to the authentication server, and the password is also encrypted. So whatever user types in his username and password, no one can read it. It is all encrypted. That is sent over the tunnel between the router to the AAA server. Whereas the Radius, on the other hand, is not Cisco proprietary. Okay, so radius is more of like an open standard, like industry standard that every device will support. But radius is more for the remote authentication dial-in service. Dial-in user service. So radius, for example, is not used more on the authentication part. I mean to say it's not used more on the device administration part. It's more on the end user part. For example, let's say there is a wireless user. And this wireless user, he is connected to an access point. And access point is connected to the switch. Switch is connected to a router. And the router is connected to a AAA server. Okay, so now this user is not trying to log into the router. That is not the use case, but he is trying to get onto our Wi-Fi. Okay, so now we have to authenticate this user whether he should be able to get onto our Wi-Fi or not. So to authenticate the remote authentication for this user, whether he should be given the Wi-Fi access or not, that will be done by the radius. Even though it's similar to AAA, but here it is not end-to-end encrypted, meaning like only the password will be encrypted. The username will not be encrypted here with the radius. Only password is encrypted, but here the entire payload in the TACACS is encrypted. Whereas on the radius, only the password will be encrypted, and TACACS is more for the device administration. Let's say this user is trying to log into the router and make some actions on the router. So in that case, the TACACS protocol will be mostly used. Whereas the radius is like more of the end user where they are trying to access our Wi-Fi by the access point. They are trying to get like our SSID. Let's say in your home Wi-Fi, you are using just a pre-shared key. There will be a password. Once a user enters the password, they will be given access. But in the organization's SSID, they can have an AD, right? The user will have an Active Directory username password. Once they enter their own username and password, they will be sent to the AAA and then validate them, and then send the response back whether they are eligible to access the Wi-Fi or not. They cannot. We can use the PSK pre-shared key, but that is like open for everyone. We don't want our guests to know our password and they can log into our company corporate Wi-Fi. To avoid that, we can let only the users to authenticate via AD, and we can give them the access. Okay. Any questions on that, guys? And radius is higher range ports, guys. 1645 or 1812. It uses the different ports. It uses the 1645 or 1812 for authentication, and it uses the 1646 and 1813 for the authorization. It does the authentication separately and authorization separately. But TACACS is a single payload. It will done everything in a single on port 49. Okay. So that is about the TACACS and radius in the AAA. So the summary is we have to make sure we have to authenticate the user, whether they wanted to log into the device or they wanted to use some services in our company. They have to have Active Directory credentials with the username and password. And that username and password should be able to help them to log into our devices and also give them the access to our Wi-Fi. That is how the AAA works. Any questions, guys? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Next topic is multi-factor authentication. In the similar example, I wanted to take we have a user, and this user, they wanted to connect to our Wi-Fi. So there will be an access point that is transmitting the Wi-Fi signal in the company. This access point is connected to a switch. Switch is connected to a router. And this router is connected to a AAA server. And this AAA is connected to the Active Directory. Okay, so now we know that if this user have a laptop, he can put his username and password. And he will be able to log into the laptop, and he will be able to authenticate with this AD. Once he authenticates, the AAA server will send the accept response, and he will be given access to the Wi-Fi. Okay, but what if he bring his own phone to the company and he put his AD, like username, password on his phone, and he's trying to connect to our Wi-Fi? So which is a bad thing. We don't want his phone, or we don't want his personal laptop to be logged into our company system. We want only the corporate user, like employee, and the employee machine to be authenticated, not with his personal device should be able to connect to our Wi-Fi. So in that case, we introduce something called multi-factor authentication, where we will install something like a certificate on his machine that he will not have any permissions. While we are giving a laptop to the user, we will put a certificate and lock it down where he cannot delete it or add a new certificate. So based on the certificate on the machine, that certificate will be exchanged with the AAA server, and server will see the certificate and validate the user, and then it will give the access to the machine. So we are not only authenticating the username and password with the AD, we are doing one more check on the user machine with the certificate. That is called two-factor authentication. So not only we are relying on just the user, but also relying on the certificate on the machine, so that we can validate two-way that he is bringing the company laptop, and also he is the one who is trying to log into our SSID. So that is the one use case of multi-factor authentication. And the other multi-factor authentications are as simple as in the real world. Like you are trying to go to your Bank of America site. Okay, let's say you are trying to go to buffer.com. So once you log into the buffer.com, first thing you will do is, once you go to the buffer.com, first you put your username and password, right? And then they will say you need to do one more check, whether you want to do text message or a voice call, which you will get a code. You will put the code on the site again. So here they are checking your memory about your username and password. That is that something and then they are looking at the second factor, which is called something you have. You should have a phone or your Gmail access or whatever the two factor where you get the code, and that code have to be entered. So even though someone knows your password, they should be able to access your device as well to know the one-time passcode, right? So that is also a multi-factor authentication that need to be installed. So even in the router terminology, so this is the same. Instead of just you put in the username and password, there have to be extra certificate in play, or we can have like an phone push. So once they put the username password, the AD will send a push to the phone, like using Okta or SAML or Microsoft Duo. There will be an application in the user phone. The user has to accept the push notification or they should enter a code on the router, that whatever the code they get on the router, then only they'll get access to the Wi-Fi. That is also one more access that, something they know as the username and password, and something they have on their machine that need to be restricted. That is one more multi-factor authentication. And the third one is something you are. That is similar to your phone control. That is like, let's say you wanted to log into your phone. You have a phone that you wanted to log in. One thing you can do is like your fingerprint, or your retina scan, or like face ID, whatever that you are, which is like biological biometrics with your fingerprints or retina scan or facial scans. These are all biometrics. Based on your biometrics, that is your first way of login. If along with that, you can put extra with your passcode or a pattern that or a passcode that So that is also a two-factor authentication. So these are all different ways that you can log into the system, that you can introduce multi-factor authentication. So it is one of the security measures that you have to follow when you're designing your network, that you have to follow something something you have, and something you are. That is about the multi-factor authentication. Any questions on MFA?
Sir, it's actually related to this question. If anyone is trying to log in, we will get the notification, right? If he don't have certification to syslog or somewhere.
Yeah, if he's trying to do multiple attempts, then there will be a log generated. Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That setting also can be generated, like after 3 attempts, log the user. After 5 attempts, restrict the user. Yeah, that can be done. That is called DOS protection. It is also
where
let's say.
Sir, where we can find these activities? We can find it in syslog, or we can find in somewhere.
Syslog, yes. You can send them in the syslog if you're doing the traps, or you can also use SNMP. Remember we did SNMP?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you can also send them to SNMP server.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any questions on multi-factor authentication, guys? Okay, next topic is port security. So port security is where you are protecting your interface in the switch, right? So you will define, let's say you have a switch. On this specific switch, let's say there are multiple ports. So here on this port, you wanted to make sure only one specific device need to be connected. Let's say you want one, there is a one PC, or there is only one server. You wanted only this server to be plugged into this switch. Whichever other device will be plugged in to this port, that should be blocked. In that case, you have a concept of MAC address, right? So this PC will have its own MAC address. This switch will have its own MAC address. So whatever the MAC address that is learned on the switch, we can hard code that MAC address on the port, so that only that PC or that switch can get the frame passed on the switch. So that is called MAC address sticky. So we are sticking a specific MAC address to the specific port, and that MAC address will only be used. And if someone remove our PC and plug in their own PC to the switch, like intruder, let's say they came to the data center and they plugged in, by removing this server, they plugged in their own server. That server should not be able to send the packets in our switch. So then what we will do, we will put the port security sticky or MAC address sticky on the specific port with that server and make sure that we are not letting other interfaces to be connected on this port. Okay. And also there is a concept of allowing multiple devices on a specific port. For example, if you wanted to restrict like 3 devices, okay, so let's say there is a switch again, and this switch has one specific port, and this port you can either plug in device A, device B, or device C. So the maximum that you wanted to restrict is 3. So you can also put the maximum MAC limit, maximum limit of 3 devices on this port. Only it can learn 3 different MAC addresses. So when someone tries to plug in their 4th device, that will not be allowed on the switch port. So there is also a limitation that you can apply with the maximum number of secure MAC addresses on the specific interface. So that can also be done on the switch port by applying the port security maximum command, so that you can apply maximum number of MAC addresses on a specific switch port. And then there are different conditions to avoid this, meaning like, so there are three conditions, I mean 3 violation activities that switch can do. Let's say there is a switch and now there is a PC connected to it, which is a legitimate PC, and someone tries to plug in an unauthorized PC to the same interface. Then it can do 3 actions. One is protection, other one is restriction, so there are 3 activities it can take. So basically, to understand more, let's do a small table. Switch port action. There are 3 actions. So one action is discarding packets. Second action is sending logs. Third action is disable the interface. Okay. So there are 3 types of violation it can do. Actions, right? Protection. And then restrict. Violate. Okay, so what does the, when let's say this user send in a packet. So when the user sends in a packet, this is fine. Someone removed this PC and they plugged in their own PC and they sent the content to this port. So then let's say this port is in the protection mode. Then it will discard the packet, meaning it will drop the packet, which is yes. Will it send the log? No. Will it shut down the interface? No. Okay, then coming to the restrict. Will it discard the packet? Yes. Will it send the log? Yes. Will it disable the interface? No. Violate. Will it discard the packet? Yes. Will it send the logs? Yes. Will it disable the interface? Yes. So violate is the strongest action you can take. If someone plugs in a PC to the interface, that it will discard that packet, it will send the log to the logging server. It's also disable the interface, completely shut down that interface. Okay. So that is how you can differentiate the port security in specific interface that you can define. How do you want to deal with a situation like that? Like someone plugs in their own device to our switch that we don't recognize. Any questions on violation, guys? Is it clear, guys? Any questions? Okay, let's do a simple lab for the port violation, where we can limit the number of MAC addresses on a specific switch port. Uh, So I'm going to take a simple 3 pieces. I'm going to take a simple hub, which will just like sending like one broadcast domain. So I'm going to count all of these to the hub. And then I have a simple switch. The hub is connected to switch. Okay, so basically when let's put all of them in a same subnet. Config, I'm gonna give 10.0.0.10. Config. And 10.0.0.11. Okay, and then 10.0.0.12. Okay, so we configured this as 10.0.0.10. This is 10.0.0.11. This is 10.0.0.12. Okay, so now if you observe this switch port, we should be learning MAC address of this one. Let's try to go ahead and ping between these guys. Okay, let's go ahead and ping between these guys so that the switch will know all the MAC addresses. I'm gonna go here and then desktop. Ping 10.0.0.11 and then ping 10.0.0.12. So now switch should be able to, you know, learn all of these MAC addresses on a single port, right? So enable show MAC address table. So it's learning 3 MAC addresses on FA0/1. So let's go ahead and then define apply the port security here. So interface FA0/1 switch port mode access, obviously switch port security. We'll enable the switch port security, and then we'll do switch port security maximum of 3. Okay, and then we'll do switch port security MAC address sticky, so that those MAC addresses will be sticky on that. And then if someone violates this switch port security violation, I have 3 options: protect, restrict, or shut down, right? So I'm gonna do shut down. Okay, so now I can do so here it says show port security. I have port security enabled on this one. I have maximum security as 3. Security actually shut down. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add one more PC on this to violate that one. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take one more PC, put it here, and then try to plug in this PC to this. And I'm gonna define an IP address (10.0.0.13), and then go to desktop, go here, and then try to ping 10.0.0.10. Let's go ahead and then check. So it says maximum port, current address count is 2. Let's say show MAC address table. Oh, it's only learning. So earlier MAC address has got violated. So let's go ahead and generate some things here. See, now it became shut down immediately. Let's see why it got shut down. It says interface 0/1 is change it to down. Okay, if you do show port security action is shut down. The maximum security address are 3, current address is 3, and the security violation happened one time, so it put it immediately in the shutdown state. So this one put it in the shutdown state. Someone plugged in the 4th PC, but it's only valid for 3 PCs. So someone plugs in the 4th one immediately in the shutdown state. That is how the port security works. It will immediately shut down the port when some violation happens. Okay. Any questions, guys?
So how can we know that this have a only 3 restricted ports, like only 3 restricted PCs? Is
I
there
configured it, right? So here, if you observe, here I put maximum as 3.
Yes, what if in case like we have to solve an issue where we have to know the maximum the count? How can we do that in that case?
No, that is depends on the business use case, right? You as engineer, you will decide whether the number is 3 or number is 4.
Okay.
It's totally up to you. You are the owner of the system. You will decide how many number of ports, how many number of ways that you wanted to connect on that port.
Okay, sir. Yeah, got it.
Okay. Any questions, guys? Any more
Yes.
questions?
Sir, if one engineer puts it count 3, and what if the next engineer come and like he sets it for 4? Like how can we do like that? Or
It's an operational error. It's a human error. So whatever we do in the production, that's why it has to be reviewed in the change management call. So you cannot make changes like as you want in the production. It has to be approved by the team. So if you're doing something in the production, that need to be approved by the team, and there should be a change record. That change need to be approved. So you cannot go ahead and do the changes like as you like without the team approval.
okay, yes.
Okay. Akash, tell me what is TACACS and why it is used.
What, sir? What's the question?
What is TACACS and why it is used?
Is used to communicate between the routers and PC network.
Is TACACS used for communication?
TACACS?
Bhavana, what is TACACS and why it is used?
So it's a terminal access controller where it will be passes control to centralized information from Cisco proprietary.
Not clear. Shravan, what is TACACS and why it is used?
So where the network engineer can try to log in into the network and infrastructure. Basically communication between the router and the authentication server.
Yeah, so basically it will check whether an administrator can able to log into the device or not by communicating with the AAA server. Whether the user, whoever is trying to log into the device, it will give the permission for the user to log into the device and then let the user do what he's authorized to do. That's what the TACACS does. Okay.
So it's
Sir,
encrypted.
it also makes communication also, no, sir. Like a old central.
What kind of communication you're referring to? When you mean communication, what does that communication mean?
Like with any server in Unix network or like a remote communication.
See, TACACS is a protocol which is used for authentication. There are other protocols for communication like IP routing,
Okay.
dynamic
Okay.
routing.
Okay.
That will help you to do the communication. But TACACS help you to do the authentication, not the communication.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Fanindra, what is radius and why it is used?
Is used for network using.
Your voice is choppy.
Radius is used for remote logging, sir.
Yeah, for the remote users to access the network. It is not remote logging. It is more of like an end user who is trying to access the network. Remote logging is done by a remote SSL VPN. That is used for by using the remote SSL VPN technology, which is called TLS or DTLS, that will be used. That is something like a remote access VPN that we discussed yesterday. But the radius is more on the remote authentication, meaning a user is trying to authenticate like your SSID, or they wanted to authenticate to our corporate network. That is where the radius comes into the picture. Okay. Richa, what is port security and why it is used?
Yes, sir. Port security is such port. Yeah, port security. We can define the. It's a concept of MAC address. But we can. Sorry, something is missing. Yeah, so it's a concept of MAC address, and we put the sticky on a particular port. Sorry.
Yeah, we can restrict the number of users based on the count, right? So if we wanted to restrict the specific,
we can put the maximum amount of computers we can and make the limitation.
yeah, and we can also identify a specific device that we wanted to, and we can make it sticky so that that MAC address should only be allowed.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I'm not able to explain. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. That's fine. Okay, guys, that's all I got. Any other questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, thanks for joining today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Sir. Sir.
Yes.
If we do have any doubts in like other than this session, can we